Stewart. Stewart.
Too.
We'll go down on the porch.
God, there's someone on a canoe down there.
On the canoe?
Do something.
I don't. Look through your binoculars.
Okay.
And then you can see. Bees, and I look close, and then we're all bees, and never no butterflies.
A lot of fish in our backyard too. Well, they killed a snake out. Which got Stuart excited. I wasn't here.
It was in the air conditioning.
They were free. It was not yesterday. No.
Call a man with me here in a minute.
Nurse gave me your name, and I said, okay.
And then they got the stuff and
Just gotta have one of your pictures. I had no
Papa did
gotta have
that.
one of your pictures. And I said, well,
No,
tell me what the picture is. And she said, well, it's a picture of something.
Yeah, and you know, it was like all I could do to keep him from dragging me there the minute we touched down.
Well, I just read a good book called American.
It's just got tired sitting up there.
Yeah. So really,
I just can't sit.
I do too. Oh yeah, I remember
and bought it at Washington Harbor. I was 30
adequately
horsepower.
involved in
My
the
brother
community
bought
and
a
maybe
powerful
share some of those skills and so on.
and
So that's, we're doing a
we can
survey
take
now that,
2 and 3 people up.
that I helped.
Well, we
develop and so on, and,
had 2 boats,
yeah.
and
we
they've
got
been
our
over
grant for
in, we've had,
$50,000
we've done different things throughout the years. We had one boat
So that's
down
enough.
here, it was a ski boat.
Everybody, this is one of our grandsons. The other one's down in Atlanta for a soccer tournament. This is Daniel Ryan. Hi.
Daniel's grown a foot since we saw him.
It's better looking.
Yes, and gotten absolutely handsome.
Do you remember them? Yes. And this is Leslie. This is her mother, Carol. This is Ted. They're from Iowa, and his wife. Where'd she go? And Pat, you know Pat. And this is, they're from Sacramento, these 2 people. Wiley.
We're Joan and Dick Wiley.
We're Joan and Dick.
And they say that Aunt Heather looks like her.
Well, she looks like our
And
side
you know
of the
Aunt
family.
Margie. And this is Steve Gibson from Iowa. And Gordy from Minnesota. And Tom from Chicago.
Now, and you're supposed to.
That's about it.
Don't you miss your house? That's such a nice
We have a bigger house here.
I know, but the size doesn't matter. Well,
Well, we have a, it's about 3,000 square foot,
not yet. Not yet.
Where's Archie? Archie. Where's your flash?
Steve Gibson.
What?
Where's your flash? Guilty.
what makes it flat, it does that automatic.
I think
So you got it on automatic?
It's always on. If it's too dark, it flashes. But if you need
I think you ought to take it over there. That would be good.
You're gonna have to bring us together, I tell you.
Another margarita sat out there very long.
I didn't really know.
I know, yeah.
Your shutter's closed. All right.
Yeah.
Jeff. Still close. It's gonna be a button. You're gonna have to push it down.
Sit down, will you? You and I don't, it doesn't make any difference.
Oh wait.
You know, we have a professional photographer here.
Okay.
All right, y'all down this way. Everybody down this way. And y'all. And y'all.
No, Dad, you sit there.
You stay in here. Jeff, come on, you're in the family. Archie, James. Come out here.
I thought we were just gonna squeeze in.
No, you're probably.
We don't have a wide angle lens for that thing. Well, he ain't gonna make it.
You guys go down that way. You
Jeff,
guys stand in front. There you go.
Jay, we want you to meet in our
Stand in front of me.
Okay, listen up.
Go get on there.
What we're gonna do,
Brother's talking.
is we'll move the camera over there and take it this way.
Okay.
Can't feel about getting food. Steve Gibson.
Make sure you get those,
Dan,
that
come
beer
on.
and,
How am I gonna explain it?
Do you want name tags? We need quality
We'll say William was absent during this picture.
Look this way. Suzanne's kind of hidden.
Get that out of your mouth.
Okay.
Get that out of your mouth.
We're ready? Guess what?
We're on delay. We'll wait.
We're
It's
ready on
okay.
film.
Oh, still on
We
flash.
got plenty of time.
One more.
Always.
We don't get off that light.
Smiling, looking up there.
We're all holding our stomachs.
It's not
in,
working.
except Junior.
It will.
No, my sticker!
Stomach
I know Steve's gonna want to go.
Stuck it to my back. Okay.
Okay. Now,
Smile.
everybody look at me.
Yay.
We'll do it one more time.
I did not know. I hope we play down there again so we can stay with you.
Come on through.
Daniel's sitting here. Is that okay?
Who's Benjamin?
Benjamin was my grandma.
Oh, that's right.
Brother.
Grandma's brother.
He was.
He was a Von Brother.
Brothers. And I think.
we want to go back to Germany because
Something humorous about my mother. In the first place, she died at the end of my teenage years, just at the end, because I was 20 when I, just about 20 when I married Dick, and she died 50 years ago, May 28th. So she's been gone a long time, and I was just a teenager, and we had more arguments as mother and a teenage daughter would have during my lifetime. And when Ted called and asked if I could tell something humorous that happened with my mother, I looked at Dick and I said, what in the world am I going to talk about that was humorous about my mother? Because my mother took life very seriously. And I think most of our discussions were of a very serious nature. And Dick thought it would be really funny for me to tell about how she interfered with my love life during my teenage years. But I didn't think that was very funny at the time, and I certainly don't think it would be very funny to the rest of you, but maybe it would. She constantly, every boyfriend I had, she was sure that I was going to marry that person. And at the end of my junior year, I met a young man from Grand Rapids, Michigan, who came up for the summer, and his parents owned, well, I think it was in the family, a farm that was near Hart, Michigan. And they came up for the summer, the two boys, and they're these two young men, and they played in the band, and my mother got to know them somehow through, well, she played a lot for any solos that were played in the band, and I think she got to know Jim that way. And she liked him, and she encouraged me to invite him over or something, and I think I invited him over, but I couldn't stand him. And she kept insisting that I mean, inviting him to family parties and so forth, and when my brother would come with his family, and she'd say, well, you call Jim and you have Jim come and visit. And while they're here, we went on a picnic one time in Ludington, and even Paul's young children at the time, they could tell how unhappy I was the whole afternoon. And everybody in the whole family kept saying, "Poor Jim, poor Jim." And we went home, and I think to this day they still will remind me of poor Jim, because of course we broke up. But fortunately, when I met Dick, she was very, very happy, and that Dick was the apple of her eye, and I agreed for once. So that was one of the best things that, at least before she died, we were happy about the one that I chose for my lifetime. But the one little funny incident that happened when I think my brother was driving. They had moved to Detroit after Dick and I were married. We were married in June, and then by the following September, she began to realize that she would have to retire. That her health was not good all the time. The last 2 years I was in high school, and the year when I was in college, she was in and out of the hospital. Her diabetic condition had gotten so bad, and they couldn't regulate it properly, and she was just not very well. So she had decided that she would have to give up her job, and she wanted to be near Paul and Norma and family. So Dick and I were home, I think, for in the early, must have been around Christmas time. And we were driving in the car, and remember pizza came out in the 1950s? And I think Paul was driving, and he had his 2 little kids in the car. And my mother and I were in the back seat, and we were driving along, and she looked up at one of the signs, and she said, "What's pizza?" And coming from my mother, who never said anything that was off color, we just all just laughed and laughed. "Mother, it's not pizza, it's pizza." So that's the funny thing.
I see why Dick wanted you to tell that. Well,
About one per family of what Paul had emailed me just before Joan and I flew here, so that and hopefully you can share it. It's Paul really giving the beginnings of his dad's, and we'll try to share them around as best we can. Pat was saying one thing about her mother that was also important for Joan mentioning about her mother, and that is that they both played the piano. And mother also sang, as did Clara. The women of the Bremicker family were very musically talented, and I have a feeling that was probably pushed on them as well. I came into the family appropriately because I was a student at McCormick Theological Seminary, and you've heard that. Dad also was at McCormick. He graduated in the class of 13. There's one little story that none of us ever tell about Dad, but because Grandpa Bremicker planned all of those marriages, he had Mother playing the piano and Dad invited to preach in an evening service. Back in those days, the Presbyterian Church had evening services. And linked the 2 of them up, and they got married in the summer of 1912. And they went back to McCormick Seminary and found a 1-room apartment about 2 or 3 blocks off the seminary. Unfortunately, in those days, it was not legal to be married while in seminary. And so Dad, being the honest Englishman that he was, even though he was born in Canada, he very much came from English stock, went to the dean of the seminary, whose last name was Zenas, and confessed that he had gotten married over the summer, and therefore he felt that he probably should not finish his seminary career at McCormick. And Dr. Zenas looked at him and then very quietly said, "This conversation never took place." And so Dad and Mother lived in Chicago and then graduated in 1913, and Paul telling about the rest of it, I think, kind of is fitting. I'm supposed to tell just a kind of a humorous story about Dad, and as I was coming into the family, not yet married, Dad decided finally that he was going to go to Chicago to the Presbyterian Seminary and get a hernia repaired. Presbyterian Hospital, pardon me. Thank you, dear. Presbyterian Hospital in Chicago. And so it was my responsibility to make sure that he got there and that he was properly cared for. So I kind of ran back and forth in CTA from the seminary to Presbyterian Hospital to make sure he was doing well. And in his own very inimitable fashion, he had made friends with practically everybody else in the ward where he was a recovering patient. And I think worked hard at trying to convert a couple of the men who were a little reluctant to accept the gospel, but that's okay. The second thing about Dad was, as I continued in seminary, he was doing a 2-year preaching on the Gospel of John, supplying small 2 Methodist churches in Hesperia, having served the Presbyterian church there for a couple of years before. And he wanted me to go to the library and get good commentaries on John. So I would, on the weekends as I was courting Joan, would run up with books out of that I'd gotten out of the library. And he said, "I don't want these kinds of books. I want some pretty serious books. I want real books on the commentary on John." So I finally even broke down and went up to Evanston to the 2 seminaries up there, Garrett and Seabury Western, the Methodist and the Episcopal seminaries up there, and into their libraries, since we had the ability to cross-fertilize our library services, to see if I could get books that he would accept as commentaries on the Gospel of John. I really never succeeded, but he still let me come into the family.
Well, first of all, I do want to talk about a couple of things before I get to humorous stories. I've become very interested in the Bremicker family, and I give my mom a lot of credit because since my grandmother Bertha died 2 years before I was born, she wanted to make sure that I at least got to know that side of the family. And so, you know, as I was growing up, she took me to New York to visit Uncle Gilbert. She took us to Florida to visit with Aunt Clara, and we even made a trip to Bentonville to see Aunt Ora. I can't remember when that was, but I do remember. Yeah, but it was a really neat visit because I got to meet, the siblings of my grandmother and sort of got to know that side of the family a little bit better. And I have little memories about each of those visits that have stayed with me for 40 plus years. When we went to visit Uncle Gilbert in New York, they lived in this fantastic apartment in Manhattan, and I was probably in love with Manhattan from the time I was a really young kid and my parents took me to the World's Fair. But this apartment was amazing with this open elevator, and we went up and she served us yogurt. And I'd never even heard of yogurt before, much less ate it. And now, to this day, I cannot go to the supermarket and buy yogurt without thinking of Uncle Gilbert and Aunt Imogen.
925 Park Avenue.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal apartment. And we went to Penny Farms to visit with Aunt Clara, and I'll never forget feeding marshmallows to the alligators. And then at Aunt Ora's, and when we went to visit Aunt Ora, she was pretty feeble at that point, but I do remember very clearly that she served us lemonade. And so those little memories do stay with you.
And she gave us a chicken that she cooked. Remember, we were supposed to be there the night before, and she had this chicken. And she insisted that we take it with us.
Yeah, so it's just I did get a very good sense of where that side of the family came from because of meeting all of the siblings. And so I've sort of been the keeper of the graphical representation of the family chart. So the fold-up screen, and I've got printouts of the family tree for people to take home. And I found a great website that really explains cousin relationships and you know, how you can be second cousins or third cousins twice removed and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, please feel free to take that. If there are any adjustments, corrections, additions, changes, you know, don't hesitate to tell me so that I can, and my contact information is on the computer printouts of the family tree so that I can make sure that we keep it as up to date and as current as possible so that future generations will know a little bit more about the Bremicker family.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. So, now getting to the story about my mother. You know, as Mom has said, you know, the Bremickers are very stoic stock. They don't find life funny. So I consulted with my sisters and said, you know, how can we come up with a funny story about Mom? Well, my sister Janet really gave us the best representation because one thing about Mom is she does not like to be embarrassed. And this is the story that we think, and I think she knows what the story is already, so I think it's okay. It's not, you know, she won't be embarrassed by it, but my younger sister Janet, and this is related to when you were, you spent the month in Toronto, is the, my younger sister Janet had developed some friendships with some people in Canada. And so they came to visit Mom and Dad, and while Janet was still living with them. And so Mom fixed them a really nice spaghetti dinner and you know, all the fixings and just, you know, really tried to make a really nice thing. And they had wine at dinner. And every time Mom would get up and go into the kitchen, one of the Canadians would fill her wine glass up. Mom didn't realize it, and she just keeps drinking along, not really thinking that she's drinking very much, because, you know, the wine's only dropping this much, and she'd get up and go into the kitchen, and the wine glass would get filled up again. Well, Mom got a little bit tipsy, as sometimes she has, and when Mom gets tipsy, she gets silly. And so it ended up being kind of just this, you know, giggly thing where she finally realized what was going on, and so she really, you know, teased these poor people from our northern neighbors unmercifully. And of course, the only thing I could think is that only my mother would get tipsy drinking California wine, serving Italian food to Canadians.
As you see, a